It's New Year's Eve 2018, getting ready to ring in the new year in 2019. We're going to do our first video ever teaching you how to make pastalaya. It's a Cajun favorite that I think anyone can bring home and do in their kitchen. Step 1, warm up the pot. Step 2, we're going to add a little oil to this warmed up pot, get things ready for our meat to go in. Next, we're going to cut up our sausage into bite-sized pieces in preparation to go into the pot. Okay, now that we have our pot and grease warmed up, we're going to add our sausage. From here, we're going to stir it in and brown it. Typically going to take you about 15 minutes or so to get that good and right, and then we're going to pull it out and get ready for our pork. While our sausage is browning, we're going to take a moment and start cutting up our butt roast. This is a pork Boston butt, weighing in at just shy of 7 pounds. Alright, as you're cutting up your pork, you want to trim excess pieces of fat like this off, if you can see that. You'll also want to keep the pork in pretty good sized chunks. You can see this compared to my hand, get an idea of what that looks like. Cut it up, get it ready for the pot, life will be good. Okay, we've taken the brown sausage off and moved it to the side. Note the color there, we're getting a nice little flavor added to the pot. And it's time to throw the pork on. Okay folks, here comes the pork heading into the pot. Let's listen out for it. Oh yeah, that's it. Now my little technique here, I'm just sliding it right off the cutting board. Now you can take a look at it there. Isn't that beautiful? Woo! So while that meat is browning, I want to talk to you a little bit about sausage selection. Preferably you'll use an andouille style sausage straight from the Cajun tradition. It may not always be available, so whenever you can, choose something that's well smoked. Personally, I like hickory flavor, but do the best you can. Shameless plug here, I won't get a dime for it, but if you happen to be passing out I-10, a little bit outside of Lake Charles, Louisiana, stop by Rabidou's Sausage Kitchen. You won't be disappointed. Okay, let's take a look here as the meat's brown and kind of show you how things are going. Right now you'll see the nice color of the meat as it's getting darker, and you'll see what's happening as the meat begins to cook down. Along with that from the sausage, you get a nice little dark coloration. And as this boils off, you'll have what we like to call the stank. The stank's what adds the flavor to everything, and you're going to see it's actually going to cover the noodles later on, and that's where the flavor is going to come from. It's going to come from the meat and from the onions. Speaking of onions, let's transition and talk about those for a minute. I've got 3 large sweet yellow onions here cut up. What you want to look for when buying onions is yellow onions. If you can find sweet ones, look for the name Vidalia. They come from Vidalia, Georgia. That's Vidalia. And if you can't find those, you can also look for the Walla Walla onions, which are grown in the fantastic state of Washington, which is where I'm coming from right now. And if you can't find those, just get yellow onions. They have those anywhere. Those will do just fine. Cut them up. They don't have to be pretty because we're going to cook them down. Well, I don't know if you can hear in the background, but when I'm cooking, I like to have a couple good things in hand. First of all, good whiskey, good Cajun music. You may be able to hear that is Jolie Blanc, the Cajun national anthem, performed by Rodney Lejeune and the Texas Cajun Playboys, one of which is a steel guitar player, my grandfather. And I like to have my dog, Marianne, come say hey to YouTube. Look at him, boy. Good boy. Say hi to YouTube, Ian. Okay, let's have another look at the pork here as it's browning. Here you can see we're getting nice little darker color, starting to get some little stank on the outside of the pot. See the color of the stuff is starting to get into the spoon there. Life's starting to get good. We're going to get this nice and brown, and we're going to get ready to add the onions. And that's where a major part of contention comes in with me and lots of other people who cook jumbo or pastalayas. Okay, it's time to add the onions. Here we go. Now add these in here. We'll move this cutting board out of the way, get you a little shot of what's going on, and we'll stir these suckers in. Oh yeah, that is where it's at, my friends. Alright, so where I was saying about the point of contention here is a lot of people actually will remove the pork at this point. They'll brown the pork and remove it and then cook the vegetables down. Well, there's 2 points of contention here. Is one, you may notice that there's the Trinity missing, or 2 pieces of it anyway. For my jambalayas and pastalayas, I use only onion and garlic. I do not use bell pepper or celery because the way that I cook them down, they get so heavily cooked and they don't hold well. They cook down too much and become almost, their flavor and texture becomes weird. So I typically use only onions and garlic at this point, and I also leave my meat in the pot at this point in time. You may have also noticed that I haven't used any seasonings up until this point. I usually do this after the onions start going a little bit because I like the moisture to stay in the pot, and the seasonings that I use will have a tendency to draw some of that out, making the mixture drier, and I like to keep the moisture in there. Okay, here we are only moments after stirring in the onions. All I've done is stirred them over the meat, and you can already tell a drastic change in the color of the onions. You see how much browner they are already. And this is coming from, guess what? The stank on the pot from the sausage and the pork. Now, in the process of cooking these onions down, we're going to produce a little more stink. Why don't we? Now, as these onions are cooking down, one of the first things that they do is they begin to throw a little moisture. Surprise, surprise, the vegetable is full of moisture. So what that does is help to liquefy things a little bit, add a little moisture to the pot, break some of the stank loose from the sides, and things get to cooking nicely. And as these onions cook down, I'll begin to add seasonings, and then from there we'll add whatever moisture we have handy. Typically for me, that's either water, chicken broth, or cold beer. In this case today we'll use chicken broth, but it's not always bad to have a cold beer handy. So as these onions are cooking down, I'll continue to stir them every few minutes, making sure that they're not sticking too bad to the pot or that anything's burning. Another thing to look out for is to make sure that the fire stays just low enough. You want to keep your fire down pretty low at this point. And I'm going to cook these onions pretty much into an oblivion. So they end up being kind of part of the sauce in the end, if that makes sense. So when it's done with, you have a few little small chunks of onion, but for the most part, the onion is turned into a paste mixed with the stank from the pot and the seasonings we'll add later. I thought I'd share a little bit about my scenery here. That is the peak of White Horse Mountain that I see in the distance every day when I look out my office window. Normally I would have my family out here. They would be hanging out with me, checking out, see what's going on, but it is currently 34 degrees outside. Needless to say, nobody wants to be out in this mess, but it's sunshine and we're happy to be having that here in the great Pacific Northwest. Okay, let's have a look at the pork here. Now you can see the onions have dramatically cooked down. Cooking them nice and slow, pretty much into an oblivion. Now, take a little hint at what the stuff on the bottom of the pot starting to look like here. So we have a nice reddish brown, yellowy brown gunk that's starting to form on the bottom. Keep in mind, folks, we haven't even added seasoning yet, which we'll do right now. First round of that, because we like a dish that's a bit salty and it's got a wide variety of flavorings, we use Tony Chachere's Creole seasoning. Many of you who know this will know that it's quite salty, so it works out great because we add a little bit of this. It's got some nice spices in it, and then it takes care of our salt for us too. And of course, can't get by with doing this without adding a nice little dash of regular old-fashioned black pepper. And this is a good stage. And the next thing we'll add at this point, I'm going to step away for a little second here, and I'm going to grab the next major ingredient, which is garlic. You can use this fresh, you can use garlic powder or whatever, but I like for using for jambalayas and pastalayas, I like to use it as, you know, the liquid minced garlic. The reason I like to do that is because it has its own moisture. It's not already dry. It doesn't suck up a lot of the moisture that's already in the pot. So we like to get that, add it now, and stir that in to get that nice garlic flavor. Alright folks, let's take a look how things are going here. First, if you take a look and see that we're getting a nice change in color here. Everybody see what's happening there? So the onions are cooking to an oblivion. The garlic's kind of catching up. Pretty soon we'll start having some sticking going on, and when we do that, we'll start to add our chicken broth to keep things from sticking to the bottom as we cook it down farther. Okay, YouTube, I've taken the liberty of cooking this down, get everything cooked down nicely, and then adding just a little bit of chicken broth to break that stink up. Bring it up to the surface and show you kind of what's going on. I'm going to stir this up a little bit. I'm going to pull the spoon out and show you what we have on here. Now, take a look at the color of the meat and what's on it. Look at what's on the spoon. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the steak. That's what gives flavor to dishes that we're going to cook today. including pastalaya, jambalaya, and many other things that we'll cook over time. But that is the stink. If you don't understand it now, try it yourself. It'll become quite apparent. Okay, folks, I've added the sausage back into our mix, and I've also added our liquid in. In this case, I use chicken broth. In my case, I'm doing 2 pounds of pasta, so I used about 9 cups of chicken broth. So for fun, figure on about 4 to 5 cups per pound of pasta that you're using. So in my case, I use 4.5 cups. We'll see how it turns out. I'm going to bring this to a boil, and at this point, you want to taste it. It should taste over-seasoned at this point, because when you add 2.5 pounds, or excuse me, 2 pounds of pasta, it's going to soften things up a bit. So you definitely want it to taste stronger than it is. Just to give you an idea, we talked about the stank a few times. That's what our water looks like now. What do you think? Oh, okay, we've added our 2 pounds of pasta. I'm going to stir them in nicely here. Make sure they all get good and wet. So we're going to get those stirred in nicely. And then for about 10 to 15 minutes, we're going to keep this at a medium-high heat. Keep a little small boil and let the moisture soak into the noodles. Alright, at this point, while the pasta's soaking in our nasty juices, what we want to do is make sure to stir that about every minute or so during the process. So for that 10 to 15 minute period while the moisture is soaking into the noodles, just want to kind of do a little light stir and kind of mix it up about every minute or so. Okay, YouTube, we're finishing near the end. You'll notice that most of the liquid is gone from our mixture. And now we're coming to the point where it's just about time to cover it. What we'll do is, as this mixture completely, when the water gets down to just about nothing, we're going to turn the fire completely off and cover it for about 10 to 15 minutes, and everything will be ready to go. The noodles will be cooked to proper mushiness, and the flavor will be there. Okay, YouTube, we're going to remove the lid now. Take a look at the final product. Our pastalaya is done. We're going to stir it up a little bit here, kind of show you what's happening. And this is what it ends up looking like. Bon appétit, and laissez le bon temps rouler.